On the morning of September 7, 1978, a man named Georgy Markov was standing at a bus stop on Waterloo Bridge in London, waiting to cross to his job at the BBC. It was raining. He was holding an umbrella. He felt a sharp sting in the back of his right thigh. He turned around. A stranger behind him was picking up an umbrella he had apparently dropped, mumbling an apology in a foreign accent, then disappearing into a taxi. Markov thought nothing of it. 4 days later, he was dead. The stranger's umbrella had been modified into a weapon. Its tip had been engineered to fire a pellet the size of a pinhead, drilled with microscopic holes and packed with ricin, one of the most lethal poisons known to science, directly into Markov's leg. It's the reason the case is still known today, in intelligence circles, as the umbrella murder. That object in your hallway closet, the one you grab without thinking on your way out the door, has been a murder weapon, a religious symbol, a mark of tyranny, and, for 200 years, a source of public humiliation so severe that men in London were pelted with garbage in the street for daring to carry one. The umbrella is one of the oldest objects human beings still use exactly as it was originally designed. And the story of how it got from the courts of ancient kings to your umbrella stand involves an English philanthropist who spent 30 years being mocked into changing an entire country's mind. A legend about a woman in ancient China who watched children running from the rain, and the reason it took governments over a century to accept that keeping dry wasn't a crime against masculinity. Rewind 4,000 years, and the umbrella already existed, but it had nothing to do with rain. In the sun-scorched empires of the ancient world, Egypt, Assyria, and later Persia, a servant walking behind the king or pharaoh holding a shade over his head wasn't providing comfort. He was broadcasting a message. Only the sun cast a shadow over ordinary people. A king's shadow was cast by another human being, on command. The parasol, from the Latin sol, sun, was not an accessory. It was a piece of political theater, and carrying your own shade instead of having someone carry it for you was, quite literally, beneath you. Assyrian stone reliefs from roughly 1000 BCE show kings seated beneath fringed sunshades held by attendants. Egyptian tomb paintings show the same thing centuries earlier. Parasols, made of palm leaves or peacock feathers, reserved almost exclusively for royalty and the highest nobility. But the object that would eventually become your umbrella, something you could fold, carry, and actually use in the rain, didn't come from Egypt. It came from China. Chinese legend credits the invention of the collapsible, waterproof umbrella to a woman named Yun, the wife of the famous carpenter Lu Ban, sometime around the 5th century BCE. The story goes that Yun watched children running for shelter from a sudden shower under pavilions, and thought, why does the shelter have to stay in one place? She reportedly built a portable frame of bamboo ribs covered in silk and gave the world its first umbrella that a single person could carry and fold shut. Historians treat the story as legend rather than fact, but archaeological evidence backs up the timeline. Bronze umbrella fittings, ribs, and folding hinge mechanisms have been recovered from Chinese tombs dating back over 2,000 years, proving the collapsible design is genuinely ancient. What made the Chinese version revolutionary wasn't just the folding mechanism, it was the waterproofing. Chinese artisans coated paper umbrellas in tung oil and lacquer, making them genuinely rain-resistant, centuries before anyone in Europe would solve the same problem. For most of history, if you wanted an umbrella that actually kept you dry, rather than just shaded, you needed to look east. The Greeks and Romans adopted the parasol too, but almost exclusively as a women's accessory. Roman satirists mocked any man seen carrying one as unmanly. The Greek word skiadeon, shade-bearer, shows up in comedy plays as a punchline, something effete aristocrats made their slaves carry for them. Notice the pattern already forming. In multiple, unrelated civilizations, thousands of miles and centuries apart, the same object kept attaching itself to the same anxiety. A man holding his own shade over his own head was seen as something less than a man. That anxiety would travel all the way to 18th century London completely intact, and it would take one stubborn philanthropist to break it. By the early 1700s, the umbrella had all but vanished from Western Europe. It survived on the continent, mostly as a religious and ceremonial object. Catholic clergy used a ceremonial umbrella, called the umbraculum, over the Pope during processions, a tradition that traces its symbolism straight back to those ancient royal shade-bearers. But as a practical, everyday object for keeping dry in the rain, it had disappeared from European life almost entirely. Enter Jonas Hanway. Hanway was an English merchant, traveler, and philanthropist, the kind of restless Georgian eccentric who, having made his fortune trading in Russia and Persia, returned to London and decided his life's mission was fixing things nobody had asked him to fix. He co-founded the Marine Society. He campaigned against child labor in the chimney-sweeping trade decades before it became fashionable to care. And sometime around the 1750s, having presumably seen umbrellas used practically during his travels through Persia, he started carrying one through the streets of London. He was instantly, relentlessly mocked. Contemporary accounts describe Hanway being jeered at, splashed deliberately by carriages, and pelted with mud and rotten food by hackney coach drivers, who saw the umbrella as a direct economic threat. Their entire business model depended on Londoners being desperate enough to avoid the rain that they'd pay for a ride. A pedestrian who could simply pop open a portable roof over his own head was a pedestrian who didn't need a cab. Coachmen reportedly went out of their way to drive through puddles near umbrella-carrying men, and street boys turned umbrella man into an insult you'd shout at someone to get a laugh from a crowd. For roughly 30 years, Hanway kept carrying it anyway. He died in 1786, and by most contemporary accounts, by the time of his death, the sight of an umbrella on a London street had gone from a punchline to, grudgingly, normal. Umbrellas even briefly picked up the nickname Hanways in his honor, although the credit for single-handedly inventing the practice is more legend than history. Hanway was the most visible and most mocked of several men experimenting with umbrellas in London around the same period. What he actually did was survive 3 decades of public ridicule, long enough for the ridicule to run out of steam. Sometimes, that's how an entire culture changes its mind, not through a single invention, but through one person's willingness to be laughed at until the laughing stops. Once umbrellas became socially acceptable, they immediately ran into an engineering problem. They were miserable to use. Early Western umbrellas were framed with whalebone or wooden ribs, which were heavy, prone to snapping in wind, and expensive to replace. An umbrella in the early 1800s wasn't a $5 impulse buy. It was closer to buying an appliance, something you'd have repaired at a specialty shop rather than throw away. That changed in 1852, when a British inventor named Samuel Fox patented a steel-ribbed umbrella frame he called the Paragon. Fox had a background manufacturing steel wire for crinoline hoop skirts, and as that fashion trend started fading, the story goes he was looking for a new use for surplus steel wire and landed on umbrella ribs. Steel ribs were lighter, cheaper, sprung back into shape after being blown inside out by wind, and could finally be mass-produced. The Paragon frame is, structurally, still the basic design principle behind most umbrellas made today. The next major leap came from Germany in 1928, when engineer Hans Haupt invented the first practical telescoping umbrella, one that collapsed down small enough to fit in a bag or a large pocket instead of requiring its own separate carrying case. He founded a company to manufacture it, Canopy, a name that's still a major umbrella brand today, over 90 years later. Automatic open and close mechanisms, wind-resistant vented canopies, and the giant golf umbrella all followed through the 20th century. Incremental engineering improvements on a shape that fundamentally nobody has ever meaningfully redesigned. While Europe was busy arguing about whether men should be allowed to carry one, the umbrella never actually stopped being a symbol of power in the parts of the world where it started that way. In West Africa, among the Ashanti people of what is now Ghana, ceremonial state umbrellas, enormous, elaborately decorated, carried by attendants over chiefs and kings during public appearances, remain a living tradition today, not a museum piece. The size and craftsmanship of a chief's umbrella still signals rank and status at royal festivals in the exact same way it signaled rank in ancient Assyria 3,000 years earlier. Two civilizations that never had contact with each other arrived, independently, at the same idea. Shade over your head, provided by someone else, is a visual shorthand for authority. In Japan, the traditional oiled paper wagasa umbrella carries centuries of its own cultural weight, tied to tea ceremonies, traditional dress, and geisha culture, and is still handcrafted by dwindling numbers of artisans using techniques largely unchanged for hundreds of years. And in modern Hong Kong, during the pro-democracy protests of 2014, protesters adopted ordinary umbrellas as makeshift shields against police pepper spray, so consistently and so visibly that the entire demonstration became known worldwide as the umbrella movement, an object built to deflect rain, repurposed in real time to deflect chemical weapons, and turned into the defining protest symbol of a generation. Which brings us back to Georgy Markov, and the reason his story isn't really a strange footnote. It's the same story the umbrella has been telling since ancient Assyria, just in a much darker key. An object built to shield the powerful or to shield anyone at all will always be tempting to weaponize against exactly the people it's supposed to protect. Here's the part almost nobody thinks about while they're getting soaked running to their car. There is a very good chance your umbrella was made in a single district of a single city in China. Shangyu, in Zhejiang province, produces such a staggering share of the world's umbrellas, by some industry estimates, several 100 million units a year, that it's informally known as Umbrella City. Entire supply chains, from steel rib manufacturing to canopy fabric to final assembly, are clustered in one region, feeding a global market that, by most retail estimates, sells well over 1 billion umbrellas worldwide every single year. And that number carries an uncomfortable footnote. Most of those billion-plus umbrellas are built to be cheap and disposable rather than durable. Flimsy ribs, thin canopy fabric, designed for a price point rather than a lifespan. A hard gust of wind, and the frame turns inside out and snaps. Environmental researchers have flagged umbrellas as a quietly significant contributor to landfill waste precisely because of this. They're a mixed material product. Steel, plastic, and fabric fused together, which makes them expensive and impractical to recycle. So the vast majority of the billion-plus sold every year end up exactly where Jonas Hanway's coachman probably would have wanted them, in the gutter. For most of human history, the umbrella wasn't about staying dry at all. It was about power, status, and who got to stand in someone else's shadow. It took a stubborn Englishman 30 years of public humiliation to convince an entire city that keeping the rain off your head wasn't a crime against dignity. It took a steel wire manufacturer looking for a new use for leftover crinoline hoops to make the thing actually work. And it took one modified umbrella tip on a London bridge in 1978 to prove that the line between object that protects you and object used to hurt you was never as far apart as we like to think. The next time you grab your umbrella on the way out the door, you're holding 4,000 years of kings, coachmen, protesters, and, in at least one documented case, an assassin. If you found this one interesting, drop a like, leave a comment with the strangest umbrella fact you learned today, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.